Happy Wednesday, everybody. Today is National Tortilla Chip Day, and we don't have any tortilla chip books, but we do have a book called Tiny Tortilla. And when I make my tortilla chips at home, I start with a tortilla, so I thought I would read Tiny Tortilla. Arlene Williams is the author, and the illustrations are done by G. Brian Carus. Dreaming of a hot, tasty tortilla, Juan Carlos pulled one bristly weed and then another from the garden. He stopped and sighed. He had been working hard all morning, but there were so many weeds. He gazed down toward town, thinking of the old woman in the plaza making tortillas at her stand. It was long past noon, and he was so hungry. So he snuck out of the garden, past the stiff, wiry ocotillo and the little sand dune beneath it, and scurried down the trail. He crossed the dry arroyo, hopping from rock to rock as if the old creek bed held water. He passed the tall saguaro cactus where a guia woodpecker had carved a nest. Then he raced to the plaza. Juan Carlos pulled a coin from his pocket and handed it to the old tortilla woman. She shook her head. "All my tortillas are gone. You will have to wait until tomorrow." "Wait?" Juan Carlos cried. "No, I'm too hungry." "I know. It is very hard to wait," the old woman said with a wink. "That's why I keep some special masa dough for times like this." She brought out a glazed clay bowl. In it was the last bit of masa. "My hands are tired, so it will be up to you to shape the masa into a tortilla," she said. Juan Carlos looked at the tiny ball of masa. "But," he said slowly, "it is muy pequeña." "Yes," the woman nodded. "So you must work the masa patiently. If you do, you'll see. It will be more tortilla than you ever imagined." She took the dough and showed him how to pat it flat by passing the masa back and forth between her palms. Her hands fluttered faster and faster as they clapped. "Palma, palma, palmadilla, palma, palma, palmadilla," she sang as she gave it a pat, pat, a pat. She winked again at Juan Carlos. "Remember, be patient. Don't take a bite till it's done." Juan Carlos nodded. "But how will I know?" he asked. "When it is so thin and so light, take a deep breath and count out 3 more pats. Then you will see what a tiny tortilla can be." Juan Carlos left the plaza. He was very hungry, and he wished he could eat his tortilla, but it didn't look thin or light. It just looked muy pequeña, very little. Stopping beside the tall saguaro, he sat down to make his tortilla. Pat, pat, a pat went his hands. "Palma, palma, palmadilla, palma, palma, palmadilla," he sang as he worked the tiny tortilla between his palms. The sun grew hot on his back. "Señor Sol, go away," he muttered. He thought of the weeds in the garden and knew he should hurry back to his chores. He felt hungry as well, too hungry to pat his tortilla even 1 second more. So he opened his mouth wide, but stopped, remembering what the old woman had said. He took a deep breath and counted. 1, 2, 3. He gave the masa 3 more pats between the palms of his hands. Suddenly, the tiny tortilla grew bigger and bigger and bigger until it became a floppy yellow sombrero that settled softly over him. It felt lovely and cool under the tortilla sombrero, and though he knew he should get back to the garden, he felt so tired from all those pat-pat-a-pats, so he curled up beneath the hat and took a little siesta. A hot blast of wind woke him as it lifted the sombrero. The tortilla sombrero swirled up and up into the air. Juan Carlos jumped to catch it, but only caught the brim. The sombrero ripped and blew away, leaving Juan Carlos with an even smaller ball of masa than when he began. Juan Carlos frowned at the masa. Muy pequeña, he grumbled, and moved on to the edge of the arroyo to finish making his tortilla. Pat, 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 went his hands. Palma, palma, palmadilla, palma, palma, palmadilla, he sang as he worked the sun-warmed dough. The wind whooshed and swooshed, bringing black billowy clouds into the sky. Soon it began to rain, and the arroyo filled with swirling water. Señor Lluvia, go away, he muttered. He wiped the rain from his forehead, wondering if he would still be able to cross the rocks into the arroyo and get back to the garden. He felt hungry as well, too hungry to pat his tortilla even 1 second more. Besides, the dough was surely thinner now. Perhaps the tortilla was done. He opened his mouth wide, but stopped, remembering what the old woman had said. So he took a deep breath and counted. 1, 2, 3. He gave the masa 3 more pats between the palms of his hands. Suddenly, the tiny tortilla grew bigger and bigger and bigger until it became a small yellow boat, a chalupa. Juan Carlos stepped into the chalupa, and it took off, spinning around and around as it raced down the arroyo. All at once, the rain stopped, and the churning water disappeared, leaving Juan Carlos in a deep laguna whose walls rose high around him. And to his dismay, the tortilla boat had sprung a leak and was filling with water. He climbed out onto a narrow ledge in the wall of the laguna and grabbed for his chalupa. He could only catch hold of a small piece of the side before the rest of it sank into the pool with a bubble, bubble, glop. Juan Carlos frowned at the masa he was holding. It was even smaller than before. Muy pequeña, he grumbled, and started all over again. Pat, pat, a pat, went his hands. Palma, palma, palmadilla, palma, palma, palmadilla, he sang as he worked the rain-freshened dough. The wind whooshed and swooshed, blowing his damp hair across his face. He began to shiver. Señor Viento, go away, he muttered as he wiped the hair back from his forehead. He felt trapped on the ledge and alone and hungry, too hungry to pat his tortilla even 1 second more. Besides, he was certain that the dough was very thin now. Perhaps the tortilla was done. He opened his mouth wide, but stopped, remembering what the old woman had said. So he took a deep breath and counted. 1, 2, 3. He gave the masa 3 more pats between the palms of his hands. Suddenly, the tiny tortilla grew bigger and bigger and bigger until it became a pluma muy grande, a huge feather, which caught the wind like a kite and lifted him up into the air, far above the laguna. Juan Carlos held the yellow feather fast against the wind and steered back toward the garden. Just then, a woodpecker in the tall saguaro swooped down and snatched his tasty tortilla feather away. He tumbled into the sand dune, clutching only the very tip of the quill. With a sigh, he sat up and began to work the wind-dried dough into a tiny ball, no bigger than a kernel of corn. Palma, palma, palmadilla, palmadita, palma, palma, palmadita, he sang as he gave the dough a pat, pat, a pat to make it flat. Sure enough, it was thin and very light, but it was muy, muy pequeña. It was the tiniest tortilla he could ever imagine. He took a deep breath and counted. 1, 2, 3. He gave the masa 3 more pats between the palms of his hand. Suddenly, the tiny tortilla grew bigger and bigger and bigger until it became the great big tortilla he had dreamed of back in the garden. He took a bite and grinned. It tasted like el sol, the sun, very hot. It tasted like la lluvia, the rain, very fresh. It tasted like el viento, the wind, so soft and airy. Savoring the last mouthful of tortilla, Juan Carlos slipped into the garden and began to pull one bristly weed after another. With each tug, he thought of that tiny ball of masa and remembered how many pat-pat-a-pats it took before the tortilla was flat. Palma, palma, palmadita. Palma, palma, palmadita, he sang to himself, and before he knew it, the garden was done. And that is the end of Tiny Tortilla. I hope you enjoyed that book, and I hope maybe you get to enjoy some tortilla chips today. I have part of a bag that I brought, and I'm going to have it with my lunch. So have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here on Thursday. Bye.